Philip Mitchell from Phil's Morning Drive, talking about distractions and safety with the different types of technology in your car. What's the lowdown on
Well,
this?
what we want to talk about today is there's a study that's come out with the folks from AAA, and they're doing this to talk about what are some ways that you can still use your phone to talk or text or use navigation and these type of things while still being as safe as possible. You know, a lot of cars have built-in Bluetooth systems where you can, you know, dictate a text message. Maybe, you know, some cars will just read you your text and then you got to pull over to respond. But this study specifically is talking about Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now, if you don't know what those are, the basic gist of it is that if you see here on the screen, we have some video of this.
Yes, we do. It's lovely.
The same thing really happens with both. It depends on whether you have an Android or you have an Apple phone. But it basically will mirror the screen, or most of the apps will be shown up on your car dash as opposed to just on the phone. Now, some of these require you to hardwire in your phone, meaning you plug your phone in when you get in the car, because it's a lot of information and data to be sending over a wireless connection. It will still work off of Bluetooth, but I know it's recommended, probably also for your battery, to go ahead and plug it in. So what this does is it allows you to still have things like navigation, even if the car didn't necessarily come with it. Or it has text messaging, and it works with, well, on the Apple. I've never used Android Auto. It works basically the same way, but with the Apple CarPlay, basically you talk to Siri. So you push a button on the steering wheel and you say, "Hey Siri, what's coming up on my calendar? Hey Siri, you know, find this place. I'm looking for this. I need to text this person." As you're driving along, like if you send me a text message, it will come up and say, "Shelby says hi." Do you want to respond? Do you want to read it again? Do you want to send her a message that says, you know, there's a standard message you can say, "I'm driving, I'll talk to you when I get there." Do you want to call her? You can just talk. But it doesn't require you to move your eyes over to the screen to make this happen, because you can be driving along and she'll tell you what you need to know to make the next move, basically, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And the same thing with the navigation. So if you put in a destination, it'll reroute you based on traffic. Actually, the new thing, Apple CarPlay will now use Google Maps. Before, it only used Apple Maps. So some people were kind of complaining about Apple Maps and said it wasn't complete in their area, or there were issues finding things, which I find that's probably true of any nav system. The good thing about this versus what's installed directly in your car from the manufacturer is it's being updated over the internet. You know, you can have a car that's a year old, and I've driven some for the show, and you get to the diverging diamond, you know, on Range Line, or you get somewhere like that, and it's not been updated, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, you're out in the field. What do you do? Go right, turn into the creek." You know, all this kind of crazy stuff. Whereas when you have an internet-based deal like this, if it's been updated with Google, if it's been updated with Apple, then it'll be updated for your trip. But you can ask it a lot of things, and it's a little more fluid. You know, they've had voice activation. A lot of people don't know this. You've been able to ask for directions in the car since probably 2000. Maybe even the late 90s if you had a top-end Mercedes or a BMW that had navigation. But they very rarely understood what you were talking about. Very rarely would they be able to, for you to just say something like, "Where's the nearest McDonald's?" or "Where's the nearest bank?" or something. It was a little more, you had to say the right phrases. Some of these cars, I remember there was a Mercedes deal that it came with a phrase book that was like this, that was like, "These are the things that you can say. So after you say this, then you have to say this." So this doesn't work like that at all. This is basically much more intuitive. It's like Siri. So if you use Siri on your phone to dictate a text message or do whatever, you do basically the same thing. It's just through the dash and it's in your car.
Wow, I think this sounds safer.
It
If you
is.
remember not to look over at that screen.
You can still look at the screen, but you really don't need to, and that's what's nice about it. Whereas some other cars, like I drove a Lexus recently that will read you your text messages, well then it puts the text up on the screen, so then you kind of have a tendency to go, "Okay, Shelby told me to be on the show today at 4, what's she talking about?" Bang, you know, then you run into something. So that's kind of, that's helpful, but it's not helpful, because it's reading it to you audibly. But I have a tendency when I see the text to want to say, "Now what does that say? What did they say? What's going on?" Because it interrupts, you know, your audio if you're listening to music. But you have Pandora, you have Spotify, you have any of those kind of things on your phone. It works very intuitively with the car. It all works through Apple CarPlay. And here's something else that's interesting. This isn't just on high-end cars. I drove a Hyundai Elantra recently that has this. The Ford Expedition that you see there on the show has this. There's, you know, Mercedes, BMW, lots of brands have this. Ford has this. So it's something that you can get pretty easily.
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I have a Jeep and I have Uconnect. I don't know what all I can do on this.
Right.
Yeah,
That's just their version of this type of thing. But I really like the Apple CarPlay deal.
Yeah, I think
So
I
there
do
you go.
too. That was very interesting.
I hope so.
I mean, that went by like rocket fire.
Good.
I still have more
good.
questions.
I
for
have
you.
lots to say.
Okay, he's the car guy. He knows all. Well, meet you all